Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this 44th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on National Security, where this hearing will be recorded for broadcast at a subsequent date on the Parliament Channel 11 and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM and on the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I'm Paul Richards, the substantive chairman. I'm the vice chair. The substantive chairman has been called away at a conflicting engagement. So the considerations today will focus on the activities, the implementation of the Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act 2012, and the activities regarding the implementation of the DNA Act 2012, specifically related to the operationalization of the DNA bank. This hearing is again being recorded for rebroadcast. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the committee to introduce themselves, following which I'll invite members of the officials of the Ministry of National Security to do so, starting with Member Munilal.
Rudal Munilal, member.
Gerald Ramdin, member.
Nigel Lefreitas, member.
Good afternoon, Nicole Olivier, member.
Good afternoon, Robert LeHunt, member.
And we have one member who may be in transit. That's Member Randall Mitchell. I'm the Vice Chair, Paul Richards. Good afternoon again. Just to advise on housekeeping and protocol, committee members and officials, please direct your questions through the chair. We'd like to also remind officials and members, activate your microphones, which are before you, when recognized by the chair, and turn them off when you're finished making your contribution. And at this point, we would like to proceed. Right, we'd also like to welcome our specially invited guests and the support team from the Secretariat. Right, at this point, I'd like to invite the officials from the Ministry of National Security to please introduce themselves, starting with the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Lewis.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman and other members of the committee. I'm Vel Lewis, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security.
I'm Derek Sanker, Acting Director, Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center.
Everyone, my name is Indira Haripol, Acting Director, HR, Ministry of National Security.
Good afternoon. I'm Justin Lewis, DNA Custodian Manager.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and other members of the committee. I am Michelle Oakley-Jones, Director, Legal Services.
Yes, good afternoon, Vice Chair and other members of the committee. I am Desmond Hamilton, and I'm the Manager of the Electronic Monitoring Unit.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and other members of the committee. I am Lawrence Hines. I am the Deputy Manager of the Electronic Monitoring Unit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheldon Henry, Project Support Officer at the Ministry of National Security.
Thank you all very kindly. And just to remind, this is a follow-up inquiry, as the committee has been tracking the implementation of the acts on a quarterly basis since 2016. We have quite a bit of information sent to us by the Ministry of National Security. And I'd like to start by, and in particular, the document which came out of your last or a visit on May 18th. So let me start by asking the Permanent Secretary. And the format we'll be using is we'll be doing the electronic monitoring aspect of this first, and then we move to the DNA operationalization of the DNA data bank second, to streamline things so that the public viewing can more easily follow this inquiry. So I'd like to start by asking the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Lewis, to give us an overview of the status of the implementation of the Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act 2012. Because let me just start by saying one of the hurdles that were articulated to the committee before included the preferred provider's completion of the installation of the hardware and software, and according to your submission, complete testing and commissioning of the solution by October 2018. And now we've received a new piece of documentation dated December 13th, 2018, which is basically pushed that down almost a year. So could you give us an update, please? And why this postponement or delay?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, again, and good afternoon one more time. I'm pleased on behalf of the Ministry of National Security to join your inquiry once again to present to you an update on what has happened with the implementation of the electronic monitoring system in Trinidad and Tobago. Over the past few months, the ministry has made, I am pleased to admit, some important progress towards the implementation and operationalization of the electronic monitoring system in Trinidad and Tobago. I should simply have said implementation. And what I'd like to do in these few opening remarks is to give you just some highlights of some of the achievements made in the last few months. One, the policy for the development of the regulations was approved. A draft of the regulations has been completed by the Office of the CPC, the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, and has been submitted for review. This review will be completed in short order and, of course, forwarded to the Attorney General for Parliament's consideration. The procurement process for the engagement of a provider, which was something that was outstanding, for the provision of the electronic monitoring solution was undertaken by iGov, as we had reported. And that procurement process has been completed, I'm happy to advise. We've also gotten the approval of Cabinet to enter into a contract with the preferred provider for the acquisition of electronic monitoring devices, the provision of software and hardware, and for the supply, delivery, and installation, as well as commissioning and maintenance of the electronic monitoring turnkey solution for offender tracking in Trinidad and Tobago. A draft contract at this time has been prepared and will be executed on conclusion of the negotiations with the provider. The Electronic Monitoring Implementation Committee has also been reconvened and are currently addressing issues that can have an impact on the smooth implementation of the system. In this regard, some amendments to the Act may be necessary and is being proposed. The Ministry is also in conjunction with the Attorney General Office is looking at those possible amendments. Those, Mr. Deputy Chairman, are some of the highlights of the work done in the last few months with respect to the implementation of the electronic monitoring system.
Just to be clear, the service provider is solution provider. Is the agency iGovTT, or is there a different provider?
Sorry again. iGovTT was actually responsible for identifying and selecting the particular provider for the system.
Is that provider?
The provider, Mr. Deputy Chairman, is Amalgamated Security Services.
Amalgamated Security Services. Is there does the ministry have can you share information as to how many would have supplied their companies as options for this, from which Amalgamated eventually won out, for lack of a better term?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Chair, Vice Chair, sorry. The iGovTT received, based on their evaluation report submitted to the ministry, received 9 bids at the date of closing. So there were 9 companies that bid for the.
It may be difficult from your perspective. Can you give us a sense of some of the companies that would have bid, or is that breaching confidentiality?
Unfortunately, we don't have those details at this time because those are actually with IGov-TT. So we could perhaps submit a written response to the committee to those.
We would appreciate that. Now, just for my clarity, and I guess members of the public viewing and listening, so they have an overview of how this is supposed to operate. What are the responsibilities or deliverables of this provider, this solution provider? The general deliverables. What are they supposed to supply in this process?
Well, actually, I'll ask the manager of the electronic monitoring unit to give you some details on that. But generally, the provider would provide both the hardware, the software, maintenance, and so on. It's more or less what we call a turnkey solution to the system. Mr. Hamilton could give you a little more insight.
Yes, that is correct. The provider is required to supply, well, the ministry opted to purchase the devices. So they will be supplying, in the first instance, 300 devices. And so we're purchasing the devices, and they're going to be responsible for the software, providing the software, the hardware, installing the support system at our building at 165 Chagrin Road. That is the hardware and the software. They are going to be responsible for the commissioning and training of staff, commission of the system and training of staff. So as PS was saying, it's a full turnkey operation, so that they will be providing now. There is also an element of maintenance support included in the system as well.
And they have a track record.
For the period of the contract, yeah.
And they have a track record, established track record of operating in this sort of realm?
Well, they are going to be partnering. They are going to be partnering with a foreign company who has an established track record.
Who is the foreign company?
Attenti Limited. I think it's an Israeli-based company.
Could you spell that, please?
Attenti.
All right, member, the Freitas wants to ask a question. Open the floor to members now.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if an evaluation was done in terms of cost in relation to acquiring services directly from the manufacturer of these devices. So, for example, does Amalgamated manufacture any of these devices?
No, as I indicated, the foreign partner would be manufacturing the devices.
So they're like a middleman. So was there any cost-benefit analysis in relation to going directly to the manufacturer and provision of these services? Because it seems as though a local entity will have to subcontract to get these devices and train and everything like that.
No, but I think there's a misunderstanding. What is happening is that the Attenti would be supplying the devices. They are manufacturing and supplying the devices. So that is the partnership. Now, and just to speak to the procurement process, the IGov-TT would have invited bidders from both local and foreign providers, and Amalgamated, is the local. And it was indicated that the local provider could have partnered with a foreign company to engage the system.
Chair, if I may add, there were a number of foreign firms which also provided documents.
Your microphone, please.
There were a number of foreign firms which, in the 9, which proposed systems for the electronic monitoring system, which weren't partnered with a local provider. They came solely based on their international experience, and that was evaluated against the entire lot. And through that evaluation, we then finalized who was the final person.
Just one question before Member Ramdin and then Member Munilal. Do the officials, or did IGov or the officials of the Ministry of National Security see any possible challenges or conflicts based on the fact that Amalgamated Security is already engaged by the state in terms of the criminal justice system in another regard, and their capability to handle that and also move into this new realm, which is also directly related to the Ministry of National Security and also dealing with offenders in Trinidad and Tobago.
No, I don't think the IGOV and its evaluation team saw any conflict of interest or any conflict at all with respect to the bid put in by the provider and any other work that they may have ongoing now or in the past with the government.
Having any information on the vetting process and narrowing down to the chosen solution provider, and given that it is in the realm of national security, is there any concern that the public may get the impression this is developing some sort of monopoly situation that may not be in the best interest of security overall?
I suppose that's a good point, Mr. Deputy Chairman. I really can't say how the public may view it, but certainly I think the work that IGOV have done in the procurement, in the whole procurement procedure, I think it could stand up to scrutiny. And I'm sure that it could be properly articulated to the public in that regard.
Consideration at all from your perspective? Or concern at all?
No, it was not.
Member Ramdeen, you wanted to ask a question?
Good afternoon. The evaluation committee that evaluated these bids at IGOV-TT, who comprised this evaluation committee?
I don't have a list of the members before me, but they were experts that were selected by IGOV-TT, along with persons from IGOV and members from the Ministry of National Security.
In the document that we've been provided with respect to this evaluation of tenders, there is an endorsement that the board of IGOV-TT, well, let me read the entire thing. The evaluation committee conducted its evaluation of the bids submitted and completed its report with recommendations during the period July 9 to 13 to 2018. The next endorsement is that the board of IGOV-TT requested amendments which were completed and signed off on July 20th, 2018. What does that mean? What does amendments relate to?
I don't quite remember what the amendments were, but some of them were simply grammatical amendments. Some of them were amendments based on how the matters were expressed. Nothing, I remember, substantive in terms of what was, in terms of the role and functions of the evaluation committee.
What I find a little bit strange about that answer, Mr. Hamilton, is that on the 20th of July, these bids were evaluated between the 9th and the 30th. On the 20th, which is 1 week after, the board of IGOV requested certain amendments to be made, and that was done a week after. So if we go by what you've said, which is that these amendments were grammatical, and let's take that. Then the further amendments were suggested by the board of IGOV-TT and signed off by the evaluation committee a week after that. So since this was submitted, this evaluation report was submitted on the 13th, on a weekly basis for 2 weeks, the board of IGOV-TT suggested that there are amendments that were to be made to the evaluation report that was then submitted, and the copy of that report was then sent to the ministry on August 10th, 2018. Is that correct? Is that a proper evaluation of this bid? What I don't understand, Mr. Hamilton, is if you picked up errors after 1 week, right, on the 20th, and you corrected them, you said they were grammatical, what are the other things that were suggested to be amended a week after that?
No, I don't want to speak for the committee. And because they have, like we have our internal review process.
Correct.
That's one part of it. The other part of it is that I seem to remember that one of the I think it was the chairperson was unable to be available, was not available to sign off on the report for a period of time. I seem to remember that, but I don't want to speak to that too much.
I wouldn't, speaking for myself, I wouldn't suggest that the absence of the chairperson will be described as a further amendment was suggested by the Board of IGov-TT. But in any event, what I want to ask is this. Is anybody who is before us, whose responsibility it is to have custody of these documents, whether it be by the Ministry of National Security, are you all prepared to give us the documents that constitute the evaluation report and the bids that were made in this matter so that we can have a sight of it and see how it is that Amalgamated came out as the #1 bidder, having regard to the international persons who had bidded, who made bids, the local people, partnering with international people? We are concerned. So we want to be able to satisfy ourselves and the population that when Amalgamated was chosen, it was a process the permanent secretary said he thinks it could stand scrutiny. I want to be assured that it could stand scrutiny. So is that a position that you all can agree upon?
Certainly, I'll be advised and based on.
Committee will write officially, Secretariat will write officially to request
certainly
documentation as Member Randin has asked. Member Munira.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. To the Permanent Secretary, a couple small questions to follow up on this matter and then on another issue I'll raise. You said that the evaluation committee would have constituted persons from the Ministry of National Security as well. Any person in the room here who actually on that evaluation committee?
Yes, member. I was on the evaluation committee, yes.
Thank you very much, because that helps me. The next matter, could we just have a sense of the terms of this contract, the cost and the contractual period, for how long would a provider be providing the service? And I'll come back to the other question in a moment.
Sorry, the term is for the contract is for a period of 3 years. The cost, if I'm allowed to share that,
that's dollars, so you're allowed to.
It's $10,300,000 approximately.
1 year for the 3 years?
No, that's for the 3 years. That's for the entire period, and that is for the purchase of the devices and the full turnkey operation, as we had stated.
That's for hardware and.
That's for hardware, software, licenses, training, and
service provision.
And service provision, maintenance and support.
The service provision will include daily oversight or monitoring or supervision of persons using these devices and so on?
No, for the most part, over the initial period, for the first, I think it's 6 months, thereafter the electronic monitoring unit will be engaged, will be providing all the support services. We will be monitoring, doing the monitoring and so on. Something else you were asking?
Just to clarify, you said it was a 3-year contract.
3-year contract.
10-something million.
At 10.3
That would be Trinidad and Tobago dollars?
Trinidad and Tobago dollars.
Okay.
VAT inclusive, yeah.
Sure, great. Could I move on to another issue? Yeah. Earlier in the opening statement of the Permanent Secretary, I just want to get back to that issue of the regulations. You were saying that the draft regulations have been concluded somewhat at the level of the ministry and it is now before the Attorney General. Is that the position, just to clarify for me?
Those draft regulations, once they've been reviewed by the ministry, those are going to be forwarded to the Ministry of the Attorney General Legal Affairs.
So they are to be forwarded, or have they already reached the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs?
If I could assist the Permanent Secretary, we had a draft that was submitted to the ministry recently, and the ministry is now reviewing the draft to send to the Chief Parliamentary Council to consider those recommendations, and then they will send back the draft to see to what extent the ministry has no objection to a final draft to be submitted to LRC.
Okay. Ma'am, you probably can help me with the next area of this questioning. So, as I understand it, and you can correct me, pursuant to the legislation, those regulations will go through LRC, will then go to Cabinet for approval. And what is the procedure? Is there parliamentary? Are they subject as well to parliamentary approval by positive or negative resolution?
Subject to negative resolution. If my colleagues could assist. Yeah, I think it's negative resolution,
Sure.
member.
Could I ask, do you have in mind, or could you now tell us, what is the time frame before this? I mean, surely you're not in control of the parliamentary agenda, but a time frame by which something like this could at least leave the LRC and possibly to come to the parliament. Are you all working with a time frame at all?
With the negotiations going on now with the provider and so on to finalize the contract, that, based on our discussions with IGov and so on, seems to appear that that would go right into somewhere the vicinity of June, July or so. So we are now trying to see that as the time frame to put all the pieces together for the rollout of the implementation of the system. In fact, when I say June, July, it's not necessarily only for the contract, but after the contract is signed, for the equipment to get here, for all of the players to get in place, to start utilizing the devices, we are seeing a period.
I think the member was asking the time frame for the regulations. Yes, right. Now, we don't have control over that, but we are hoping that we will review the regulations at the ministry level, and that review should be completed within about 3 weeks, after which the draft regulations will be resent to the CPC for final drafting at the LRC.
A quick question, how long did it take to arrive at some type of conclusion with the draft regulations?
The CPC would have received the copy of the approval of the policy for the regulations, I think was in July last year. They would have probably begun reviewing or developing the regulations by August, because we were very closely collaborating with them. And it was an iterative process. We were helping them develop the protocols, procedures, and so on, which is what the regulations are, really the core of the regulations are.
Mr. Permanent Secretary, just to follow up on my last question on this particular area. As I understand it, a provider has been selected through a process involving IGov, based upon a competitive process there. Having selected the provider, you have now received cabinet approval to move ahead with the provider to enter a contract of some sort. That contract requires further negotiations. Along what lines? Is it money? Is it technical specification? Is it? I'm trying to see what in finalizing a contract for $10 million, more or less over 3 years, would take us from January to July. If you can just help me with that, because clearly they have been selected based upon something, and something good, that they are the best deal, they are the best provider, they can access the equipment, they know what they're doing. Why would it take 7 months to complete a contract in that way? Just help me.
So if I give the impression that that would be the time frame for the conclusion of the contract, what I was aiming at is giving you a time frame of another 6 or 7 months to have the system roll out, to begin the use of it. So and I said that in terms of having all the pieces put together, the regulations completed and everything. But certainly the contract, we anticipate that's a matter of days or a couple of weeks or so. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question to Mr. Hamilton. I just did a quick Google search on Attenti here, and their mission is to enable societies to become safer and more secure and advance they supply community-based monitoring, supervised release monitoring, substance abuse monitoring, community-based monitoring again, and supervised release monitoring. When I went further into the service provision, is it that Amalgamated Security is going to be using Attenti to source the devices and also the hardware associated with connection to the devices? Walk us through the link between Amalgamated and Attenti in the context of, because part of what their website says is they provide solutions to government and government agencies, which suggests to me that the state could have gone directly to Attenti as opposed to going through a third-party supplier.
Well, you have to remember that the bids were, advertisements for the bids were posted locally and internationally. Attenti on its own as a company did not, and they had the opportunity to, I guess, but they did not respond to a bid as a company. Now, that is a fact. So they have partnered, and which is what the RFP would have provided for, that they can partner, a local company can partner with a foreign company to provide the solution. So it's not like they they are third party. They are partnering with Amalgamated, having not themselves submitted a bid.
Without implying any malfeasance, I don't know why this gives me a bit of a disquiet, if only because of the seeming placement of such a large, or a number of different dimensions of national security into the hands of the same private company. And I don't know if that crossed your mind at all. And you mentioned $10.3 million in terms of the overall contract for the 3 years. My understanding is that the government, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, would have paid for the devices, or is it in the device cost included in the 10.3 device cost, Amalgamated service fees, hardware, software, and maintenance services?
That cost covers everything.
Who's providing the maintenance services for the devices? Attenti?
Amalgamated in partnership with Attenti. So they're almost like one entity.
They can't be one entity. They're two different.
No, I say they're almost like one entity because they are partnering with Attenti. So they will be providing in terms of the, for example, in terms of the maintenance support. They may have, that is Amalgamated, may have persons locally who will provide maintenance support in Trinidad. They may train persons, so they may have, I don't know exactly how it will be rolled out, but that is certainly what is but you remember that the ministry was not involved in the.
I know,
right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Member Lahunt.
To confirm, the concept of Amalgamated, when the evaluations were done, I think you answered it before, I just want to bring it back again. Is the Attenti Amalgamated, that was one bid. That's a foreign company partnering with a local company.
But the bid was submitted by Amalgamated.
Right.
Who would have indicated that Attenti, they are partnering with Attenti. Right, yeah.
Now, in your putting out for your RFP and so forth, Amalgamated, the analysis and when you looked at the different facets under which Amalgamated is already involved in whatever aspects that they're already involved in, it was still felt that they were still eligible to add more. They were not eliminated as a result of that. Or was that looked at all in deciding that, listen, Amalgamated is involved in, some sort of separation of responsibilities in the whole spectrum of the prison service?
I would want to think that the government agency, IGov, would have taken all of those considerations into play in determining that they are going to entertain the bid and, of course, to hopefully to propose the award.
Member Oliver?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just follow up on that, because with all due respect, Permanent Secretary, I don't think it's for iGov to make a determination on that. This seems to be a national security policy issue. And are you comfortable then to have so many different arms of our national security being maintained by one individual private sector entity? That does not give me any comfort from a risk standpoint. So I think it's something that the Ministry of National Security needs to look at clearly from a policy perspective, despite having had your operators on the evaluation team. It's not something that iGov should make a determination on. Well, I would like to ask some more about the type of service that is being provided. So we indicated that, 300 devices. Did you say that they would be purchased by the ministry, or would they be supplied as part of the contract?
They will be supplied as part of the contract. So the contract price includes the price of 300 devices in the first instance.
Now, when this 3-year contract term has come to an end, what happens with the ownership of the devices? What happens with the software that would have been implemented, that would have been uploaded into the ministry's system? So is there any residual ownership? Are we tied to purchasing, licensing? Then is the software something that we would always have to license from the software provider, or is there any barrier then at the end of this 3-year period to another entity being able to come in and provide similar services?
I'll ask the deputy manager to address this issue.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, member. The RFP was designed in such a way that the system is an open source system, so we are not held in terms of any sort of close connect. Once the 3-year contract has concluded, we can continue the program with the said contractor, or we can move if we so wish. It's an open source platform, which means there is no proprietary software on the system. All elements of the units are being purchased directly through and for the Ministry of National Security at this point in time. So we reside sole ownership of all the devices. And as we move forward, should there be a change, or should there be better equipment, should there be advances in technology, we have the ability to move forward, because we are not held to stay with one system or with the existing provider this time.
Could you just give some indication as to the nature of the maintenance aspect of the contract? So if a number of those initial 300 devices are defective within the term of the contract, I mean, would the ministry have to pay additional for the replacement, or is that replacement cost built in? I'm just trying to get a sense of the nature of the service being procured.
So as it stands, we have 300 devices built into the system. There is something what we call a 20% latency. So in the event that something should happen, built into the contract, the provider have to provide 20% of spares readily available to repair and to have the systems operational. So at all point, we must have 300 devices which will be serviceable within Trinidad and Tobago. Thereafter, if we expand the system, we will then purchase on an as-need basis.
No, let me just ask one final question. In terms of staffing of the unit, I noticed a number of staff have been hired. Are you up to your full complement of staff, or are there additional vacancies still to be filled?
All right, we have an approved contract establishment for the unit of, I think, about 9 persons. And all the positions, well, the deputy manager and myself have been engaged. We have engaged also through assignment within the ministry, a business operations coordinator who's with us this afternoon providing support. We have shift monitoring operators, 5 approved, who have, the process of recruitment has completed, and they are standing by until waiting until the provider is engaged. We have,
So in other words, what we've done is we've taken on staff on an as-needed basis, because since the system is not yet fully operational, we've taken on those members of staff who require to run whatever system we've put in place now. And as we become more operational, we bring on other persons as needed. So in a sense, we didn't want to bring on persons like, for example, the shift monitor operators to monitor nothing, to sit there paying them really. So it was really a strategic move in terms of how we bring on staff. Although, let me say that all of the positions had been advertised, persons have been shortlisted and so on, so we could bring these persons on within a fairly short period of time.
And the entire structure is contract positions.
Yes,
Just want to
it is.
ensure that you will not, when you are ready for them, you won't experience any undue delays as happens throughout the public service.
No, we shouldn't, because actually the response to the advertisement is quite overwhelming.
Shouldn't is a broad order because there have been already significant delays. Member De Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last time you all were here, it may not have been you specifically, you indicated that there would have been a trial run of some sort in relation to a small number of devices, just for ironing out any logistical problems that might occur. Did that ever happen, the trial run?
Well, we didn't indicate that there was going to be a trial run as a separate part of the process, but at the installation phase, the devices will be tested to determine, whether they are working and so on or not. The accuracy of the devices will be tested, so persons will be probably fitted with a device to determine and to see how the tracking is being done. But there's not going to be a separate period of testing the devices. That will be done as part of the installation process.
So if there's a huge logistical problem that arises out of your trial run, then how does that affect everything going forward? Because what we're hearing so far is that the contracts being drawn up, providers are being chosen, there's a certain amount of money, and there's still no trial run. You may do the trial run in the installation phase and find out that the devices are just not suitable for Trinidad and Tobago. Are they just not going to work? So then what happens with the contract and everything that has been awarded at that point in time? Do you then go back and look for another device? How does the whole thing move forward if the trial run indicates that what you have done thus far up to that point is not suitable?
And just to add to Member De Freitas' question, because it's related, what about the dimensions of the IT infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago? How robust are they? If you can say who's providing that, because it may be a national security issue to disclose that. And the national GPS system that I suppose is going to be part of this grid. Has the accuracy of that been tested? Because you're dealing with offender monitoring, and there's a certain level of precision, I'm presuming, that is entailed here if law enforcement, if someone makes, for example, a breach, and law enforcement is to respond in a timely manner because of the possible implications.
Yeah, through you. What we have happening is that in a previous iteration, there was a layer of testing throughout Trinidad and Tobago with the devices, and some of the said proponents who would have submitted their bids. So we know that the system worked as it would relate to the robustness of our GPS system. We have also, or will be using, similar to what is being used now by, for example, the E99 system, which use a layer of GPS in order to do their layers to see exactly where the assets are. So we also look and working in consideration with other ministries in order to have what we call a robust backup or failover system to ensure that the system continue running.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a couple questions again. Director, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, as I understand it, the ministry will be engaged in some finalization, read the contract. Would it be premature to indicate to the meeting and to the national community a cost of the contract at this stage if you have not finalized the contract? Because we are hearing 10-point-something million over 3 years. But in finalizing the contract, would that not be subject to change one way or another, depending on what other service, whatever, is negotiated? I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, certainly. That's a good question. And we are, in fact, intending to negotiate with the contractor or discuss with the contractor the savings that could be realized based on when devices are imported and so on, the reduction in import duties and so on of these devices. But that is the figure that was approved by the cabinet.
And the other question, just for clarification again, we heard earlier that the system that would be implemented with this would use another technology backbone, a national grid, managed or housed by the Ministry of Agriculture. Is that so? And what is this Ministry of Agriculture electronic grid system about? Because GPS system, are they managing that? Or is that something that deals only with agricultural areas and so on? But why is it in the Ministry of Agriculture? Just some clarification.
So, Chair, through you. So that system is what we call the beacons, which use triangulate all the GPS systems. As a result, where it's located now in Ministry of Agriculture, what we're going to use that for is as additional assurance. So if there were to be some challenge in our system, we can go and collate information on either system to ensure the reliability and the accuracy of the system moving forward.
So as it is now, you're really operating with a system primarily from the Ministry of National Security.
As it stands now, we'll be utilizing the system through the Ministry of National Security.
And my final question to the Permanent Secretary, given the history of this matter, Mr. PS, are you satisfied at all with the pace at which this matter, such a critical installation in national security, the pace at which this has been done? And would you be in a position now to give the assurance to the national community by July, August, or thereabout this year, that this system will be up and running? I understand the chicken and egg situation you have, in that you don't want to hire people to monitor when there's nobody to monitor, and you don't want to slap a bracelet on somebody's ankle and then discover that there's nobody monitoring. So could you give the assurance that by July, August this year, this will be operational? And are you happy at all with the pace that this has evolved at?
Well, I'm sure that the staff here will tell you that I'm not happy, I'm not satisfied with the pace at all, and I've expressed this on previous occasions. The fact of the matter is that since we've engaged another government agency to assist us, their processes had to take place, and I've tried to encourage that agency to see how those processes could be speeded up, could be fast-tracked, but unfortunately, I had been advised that not too much shortening of the time frames could have been made. So while I'm not satisfied, I look closely at what had been done and what had to be done, and I feel confident that we should be able to roll out this system by August this year.
One quick question. I know it had been articulated before when you last came before the committee. How many offenders are being considered? I know there was a number considered for the test phase, but since the test phase has now been morphed into a first phase implementation, how many offenders are being included in that? And is it being zoned in any particular regard?
The second statement first, it is not being zoned. We are going national, Trinidad and Tobago, and the number of offenders that are going to be placed in the program will be dependent upon what the judiciary does in terms of placing people on the program through the sentencing.
But I remember when there was a specific number given before for the testing phase. I think it was around 200. So is that still in train? And added to that, the indication from you all is that March 2019 is the operationalization time, not so?
Well, yes, but that is the timeline that the PS is saying that would be shifted to July, August. But
So,
they,
so we're going from May 2018,
no, that will be
March 2018.
no, May 2018, no, I don't think May 2018 was.
March 2018,
March,
sorry.
March 2019.
No, it's now March
It's
2019.
March 2019,
As we
yeah.
follow up the new iteration of this.
Right.
Because there's been several iterations of this.
Right.
And March 2019 is the new iteration, and now you're saying,
Yes.
well, July.
It's in July 2019 because we hope that the contract will be signed by next month.
You're not imbuing with a lot of confidence.
No.
Given the track
I mean,
record and the process of this, I'm being very frank.
No. We are confident that the contract will be signed February.
You were confident the last time that the test phase was going to be completed already. Is that the same confidence, or is it a different level of confidence now?
I don't remember.
I remember.
I'm sorry.
Let me also ask about an analysis timeline. So, okay, you start in June, July. At what point are you going to do an analysis of the operations of the system so that we know what we're dealing with without a test phase now? Because usually with a test phase, you have a test period, 3 months or 6 months, and then you do a full analysis of what has been happening to know what your gaps are. Is there a phase within this movement?
Yes, the intention is to do monthly reports and submit those monthly reports with analyses to the permanent secretary and to the monitoring and evaluation section of the ministry. So those will be submitted on a monthly basis. So we'll be evaluating as we go along.
Somebody for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just listening, I have a few questions, one in relation to the zoning and another in relation to logistics. There's quite a degree of logistics involved here. So, for example, based on the amount of money assigned so far, which is just over $10 million, how much devices are you going to start with? In other words, how much devices are you intending to purchase to roll out this program?
Thanks. I think we did indicate 300 devices in the first instance. Yeah.
Okay, and have you all taken into account usage? So there's going to need to be some sort of conversation between the judiciary and the unit, because remember, these devices are not expiring. So you will have an individual who, over the period of their case, may have a device, and for better or worse, that device comes off at some point. So in other words, you start off with 300 devices, but 200 are currently being used by individuals. And then the following month, 50 may come back as that case is done and whatnot. So have you taken into account the formula required for how many devices you need to keep so that you don't run out of devices? And I guess that would take into account your conversation with the judiciary and how they use the program as you indicate.
You're correct.
There must be a formula.
You're correct. Well, yes, sorry.
Let me just add here quickly that in developing the whole program, in making determinations about the numbers of devices and so on, we've actually had consultations with the judiciary, prison service, the police service, and so on. So that's how this came about. It was not just the ministry deciding that, picking a number, but that was decided upon through the collaboration with the various agencies.
All right, my next question is in relation to the zoning and Tobago. Is the monitoring of this going to be done solely in Trinidad, or is there a Tobago unit to be developed? Because I assume there are going to be devices in Tobago based on what is happening over there in relation to the judiciary and cases and whatnot. So you're going to have a separate unit in Tobago, and for the testing that was done, what happened in terms of movement between Trinidad and Tobago? So someone who's had a device outfitted in Trinidad, let's say for a case, decides that they're going to Tobago for a week or whatnot. There's no dead zones in between there, right? Whether you're flying on the plane or you're taking the boat, or what happens with the monitoring at that point? What are you going to see?
Well, actually, the monitoring could take place from Trinidad and throughout the country, throughout Trinidad and Tobago. When a person is placed on the device, there's a specific radius within which the person should operate. If the person should go outside of that, then there's an alert. Yeah, yeah, you need permission, of course, but there's an alert. If they didn't get permission, there would be an alert which the police would respond. So it's all interconnected between the monitoring unit and the police. So the police has, in fact, the police has already developed a response mechanism for treating with offenders who may flout the system.
Okay, so just for my questioning now, we don't have the devices now. So what is the case now? Someone's on bail. So the program is not there. But if the person is on bail in San Fernando, they could go to Tobago, no problems. So if you implement a system like this, it's something more constrictive that you're implementing, which is separate from what is there now. Yes?
Yes, that's so, that's true.
Two quick questions before we end. By my understanding, the judiciary had signed on to be a partner with this, a critical partner, under the understanding that there would be a testing phase because of the implications. Is the judiciary comfortable with no testing phase of this and also going national from the start? There have been those discussions with the judiciary on them being on board with this shift now?
I wouldn't necessarily want to speak for the judiciary, but I imagine that,
You would imagine.
I imagine that, I think Mr. Hamilton might correct me, but I think there should be a representative of the judiciary on the implementation committee. Mr. Hamilton.
Pierre, that is correct. The judiciary is part of has representation on the committee, on the Electronic Monitoring Implementation Committee, and we are working with them in terms of their comfort with respect to all aspects of the system.
Working with them with all aspects of their comfort is not necessarily them signing on.
Well, when we say sign off, I mean, the sign off will have to probably come from the Chief Justice himself. And there has not been that, but the representatives who represent the organization are quite comfortable.
One question before we move on to, we don't want to leave our friends from the Forensic Sciences Center unattended. The devices have been procured already, you said?
No. Devices will be procured after the signing of the contract.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. The next part of it, thank you for your contributions on this, the Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act 2012. I know the same ministry officials are before, so and including others on the activities with the implementation of the DNA Act 2012 and specifically the operationalization of the DNA databank. So we're switching to that now. So we're all on the same page. Mr. Permanent Secretary, can you just give us an overview of where we are, where that is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and just to, as an overview, just to give you some highlights of the achievements in the last few months. One, the National Forensic DNA Data Bank is now fully operational and currently housed at offices in the waterfront. Two, technical standards for the data bank is developed, and those are at the Bureau of Standards awaiting final approval. Number three, the custodian at the DNA data bank has recently completed buccal swab sample collection training of our respective stakeholders. This is actually mentioned in the Act. And some of these stakeholders include the Police Service, Regional Health Authorities, the Ministry of Health, and the Prison Service. The Ministry has also procured some 15,000 buccal swab kits for donation to the various stakeholders who are expected to take these buccal swabs. Yes, Mr. Deputy Chairman, those are some of the activities that we've been able to complete with respect to the National DNA Data Bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I know that the NFDD is currently housed at Tower C, while ABMA building on St. Vincent Street is being prepared. That building sounds familiar. Can you give us a sense of what that building is and how much progress has been made in terms of the preparation, given that a lot of the infrastructure is housed here and the plans for transference to that facility?
The facilities at the Tower C are good in terms of the work that is expected to be done by the unit. However, we are proposing to transfer to the ABMA building because of the additional space that would give us in terms of the, as well as of course the privacy and a number of other things with respect to the operations of the unit. The space, I think, is close to completion. I'd let Mr. Lewis perhaps give you a little bit more as to how close we are to completing that space and transferring the services across.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon again, Vice Chairman. Right, so level 4 of the ABMA building has been provisioned for the DNA custodian unit. We have furniture in place. We have security systems in place, such as a door access system, swipe card access. The issue is the server room. It requires lots of restructuring, such as a steel cage should be placed in there to provide extra security to the servers. There's also an electrical panel that should be installed. So works have commenced for those items. A final date has not been provided as yet. However, we're looking forward to moving, I would say, by June this year, once everything is in place.
Does the electrical panel installation or upgrade also include robust electricity backup system, given the nature of the operation?
As in a generator? Yes, we have gotten quotations for a generator. It will be purchased and installed. However, it's not critical to the operations of the unit because we can actually use individual UPS to save all our data in case something was to happen, which will give us about a half hour to save our data. So we can still operate without a generator for the time being.
And there's no plan for cloud-based services for data protection and storage?
No.
Why not?
We haven't, we don't see the excessive need for it, as in a cloud-based storage would not be, what's the word I'm looking for? We won't be in charge of that cloud-based, it'll be a third party in charge of it, and we don't want that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, just to clarify, so you have the ability as it is now, where you are, I think it's level 19 Tower C, to install samples that have been analyzed on the database. You have that ability, or you're still waiting on the other building?
No, we have the ability at Tower C right now.
Okay, so then the question is, individuals and stakeholders have been trained, so what is the holdup for actually taking the buccal swabs from prisoners as it is right now? Because I remember that's where we're going to start to populate the database and as well as service members. And that would initially populate the database, and then you would get into the regulations and whatnot of collecting samples from particular individuals. So what's preventing the holdup now? If the logistical pathway is set up and ready, what's preventing the actual taking of samples from prisoners and service individuals now?
Actually, that's an area that we propose to start, yes, but there are other samples that I think we could obtain right away to begin the database. With respect to the prison population, it is only the nurses and doctors who could take those samples. They've been recently trained. That training has only just being completed, and therefore we're looking forward to the prison service beginning those sampling as soon as perhaps a week or so. Added to that, of course, we had to train some prison officers in terms of the storage and some of the samples that they take, and in terms of the protocols that they need to put in place as well.
Okay.
So we are looking forward to that beginning in very short order.
So can I ask this question then? Might be premature, you may or may not be able to answer. So how soon after you've populated the database with the prison population, let's say, can you begin to analyze cold case files that involve DNA samples?
So if we were to get, let's say, 2,000 prisoners, their DNA profile in our database, we would need to have profiles from crime scenes also to do a comparison, which would include cold cases. So those crime scene samples would have been collected by police over the years, would have been analyzed at the FSC over the years, and the FSC should provide those profiles to the custodian unit. So currently, I have been in dialogue with the FSC. We have exchanged technical requirements in regards to eligibility of profiles, the things that they must do in order for me to accept their profiles. We have come to an agreement with those requirements, and currently there is, I would say, nothing really stopping us from today to get profiles in the system. Once those profiles have been reviewed by the FSC and deemed eligible for databank entry.
So you can start, and I'm just looking at logistics here, so in terms of the cold case files, you can literally start sooner rather than later uploading those profiles onto the databank, so that when you start taking the profiles of the prisoners, if there's any hits, then you would know pretty quickly.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, well, just to be clear, so currently there is nothing in the database?
Database is currently empty.
Okay, and you indicated that there's no reason for it to remain that way. Well, apart from the prisoners, you've already trained the police service and regional health authority officials, so they can immediately start collecting samples.
Yes.
The ministry procured 15,000 swabs. Are they still within your possession?
No, I have given 5,000 swab kits to the police force. I've given 4,000 to the prison services. I've given 100 so far to the Ministry of Health / Regional Health Authority.
Is there an expiry date on these kits?
Yes, they expire in 2022.
So you are essentially sitting there waiting for results to come into you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just want to follow up on that, on the question, because something is still troubling me. As of today, the custodian is saying that nothing stops him from receiving an entry into his bank, and the bank is empty. But there's no legal process or no institutional obstacle preventing you from receiving profiles into your bank. What is this matter about the accreditation, maybe to the director or the PS? What is this matter with the accreditation of the center for the purpose of DNA? Because then my simple question, upon hearing all of this, is why is it we don't simply have already into the data bank the police, the other critical stakeholders that you want? I mean, why is the data bank empty as of today if there's no legal or institutional obstacle in the first place?
Thank you, Member. Through you, Vice Chair. There was a slight glitch in terms of the custodian being able to accept those samples right away. That has been ironed out late yesterday evening, and therefore, as of today, the custodian could begin receiving those samples from the Forensic Science Center, as well as from some other areas. The question on the accreditation of the forensic center, I'd ask the director of the center here to give you some information on that.
The initial position taken to answer part of the question was that we would take accredited information from an accredited lab to populate the database. Legal advice was sought, and it was found that there's no bar preventing the Forensic Science Center, which have been doing DNA analysis over the years and generated a substantial database in its own, to transfer the information to populate the custodian's database. We have had the technical requirements back and forth between us. We negotiated, we looked at things that we didn't like, we came to an agreement, and we are now in a position to transfer the unaccredited forensic lab database information onto the database of the custodian.
So as it is now, your center would have a database.
Yes,
with
we have
the
generated a
DNA
lot of
profile
profiles.
over the years, which you do, and so on.
Yes.
This is unaccredited, to use a term that you are using. You can transfer that. You're saying you have obtained legal advice that you can transfer that properly to the custodian to be used for the purpose of crime solving and detection and so on, without any bar in the law that you can do. You can do that now. So, and this is something recent, so I imagine you can start doing it almost immediately. So we can get the bank filled. Well, not filled, but you can get the bank up and rolling within a few days.
Indeed, because the question was whether we can do it legally, whether the DNA Act itself barred that.
Just explain for my benefit and maybe for viewers eventually. So what is this whole business about accreditation about? Right. What is that, and why is that a bugbear?
Okay, in the bigger picture of things, what happened with the buccal swabs the custodian is alluding to? The buccal swabs will be taken from various target groups like the prisoners, the police. In fact, the police who are investigating crime in homicide cases, whether cold case, we want to rejuvenate a case, or active homicides, have been requiring DNA analysis to be done. So sometimes the prisoner who is in prison right now awaiting a hearing, a swab may have been taken from him. And depending on the nature of the crime, swabs would have been taken and analyzed at the forensic lab. However, a major decision was made last year to have the lab accredited to be consistent with international best practice. The Permanent Secretary has directed and mandated a team of persons to get together to accredit the lab within a short space of time, or within a reasonable time. We had that mandate, an accreditation committee was formed, and that committee has been deliberating over 11 meetings, and we have reached a position where we have elected an accrediting body, international accrediting body, to accredit the Forensic Science Center.
So, Najris, what's the international accreditation standard? I know there's an ISO in some domains. What's
ISO 17025 and the yes, and the now there are 2 years, the 2005 version and then the 2017 version. The accreditation bodies at this present time are accrediting laboratories to the 2005 version. But as of June, they will be required to assess and accredit labs with the 2017 version, which is a modification. They have a number of improvements to the 2005 version, and that is what we are targeting. The accredited or the chosen accredited body to accredit us to.
So just checking, now that we have all these things out of the way, as of yesterday, I know you are ready to accept, I know you could give. How long should we put there, I want to get you on record, when will all that you have, that you are willing to give, be across by you who are willing to take?
Right.
1 month, 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, what is going to take?
What I know is that what the DNA section at the Forensic Science Center has been having meetings with the custodian, and they have, in fact, did some dry runs or test runs with the data from by us to him. He has a system called Small Pond that he will populate that database, and there are little hiccups which we intend to sort out. That is a simple thing to sort out. And now that we have the technical requirements sorted out between both parties, we intend to, have the data transferred. So, and we have the legal back into the
1 month time or
in
2
fact,
weeks time?
in fact, by next week.
By next week?
Yeah.
So
Nice. Let me ask a question.
So
Mr.
it will take some time to transfer all the data, but from in next week, we'll be initiating the process because we have tried already.
all right, so from next week, we're going to start the process, and you'll probably think you might be able to get all finished within a month's time.
The custodian will be able to
No,
determine the rate.
sorry, you couldn't, interject. Sorry, you couldn't put a time frame on that because as data is generated, they have to review the data to make sure it's eligible for the data bank entry. So it's a gradual process. So we can start next week, but there's no end date. We can't say a month from now we'll have all our data. As long as we start it and we can do comparisons, we're making headway.
I want to, or I'm tempted to ask how much profiles you have in your system, but that number is probably extremely large. And I'm really looking at it from the standpoint where the DNA custodian is saying that it's an ongoing process. And we've had the Forensic Science Center in front of us before with a similar system. I think this is ballistics, where they were talking about dealing with ballistics and matching is
The
an
IBIS
ongoing
system.
process. Yes, the IBIS system. And one of the problems was how slow that process takes to sort of upload these profiles in the data bank so you could do matches. Because the real important part here is the ability to get hits, which is you have these profiles with no name, and then you have a sample set of individuals whose names are matched to a profile, and then you can compare the two and you get a hit. And knowing that the individuals, the respective individuals are already trained, and you can begin now to collect samples from the prison population, then I want to assume that once you have all of the profiles from the Forensic Science Center onto your data bank and the total size of the prison system, that you could really start to match up and get some cases moving if that's the case. And it turns out to be that. So I just want to say, how long from the permanent secretary before we could get the prison population samples into the data bank? And just ballpark for me from the DNA custodian, is it a year, 2 years before you can get at least all of the profiles from the Forensic Science Center in a database so that you could start to do that matching? Given that it's going to take a little while to get it in, but you must have an idea. It's not going to be 10 years, I don't think. But you could still give us an idea, because once that matching starts, then you could get some hits and cases could start to move forward, and it benefits the population in general. So just ballpark.
All right. Let us say they have 5,000 profiles eligible for my acceptance. They can transfer it immediately, instantaneously to my database. That can take 1 day, right? Comparisons are the same way. They're instantaneous, right? So the ballpark figure now, in a real world setting, if I was to get their 5,000 profiles between now, I would say by June, would be a good time to actually start seeing hits in the database, right?
And Secretary, just how long before we could start collecting samples from prisoners so that they could be transferred to the data bank, given that everybody's trained now?
Certainly, I think the prison service, that would depend on the collaboration that they could arrange with the doctors and nurses who have been trained to go in there and, sorry, and start collecting the vocal swabs. I would think that those collection of those swabs could begin next week, and therefore it all depends on the analysis of those swabs that the custodian could start receiving samples from the prison service. Certainly, we would make arrangements to ensure that those vocal swabs, the collection of those swabs could begin as early as next week.
How is that impacted by the procedure to become internationally accredited that's on the way now, in the context of reconciling profiles kept at LGC and other international agencies now with reconciling with our system, which is yet to attain full international accreditation. And when we become fully accredited and operational, what's the timeline for recovering that database and those samples, in addition to the samples that the TTPS may have sent to other agencies internationally for special testing for specific cases?
Well, while there's no legal impediment to the populating the DNA data bank, there's no legal impediment to do it now with respect to the samples we have. But certainly, we are proceeding with the accreditation because we are part of the global environment and we want to be seen as operating with best practice. I don't have a time frame as yet for the accreditation, but certainly the director of the center might be able to give us a better sense of the time frame.
One is the accreditation of the Forensic Science Center. Now, the buccal swabs will have a step-by-step process for analysis. They will be taken at the prisons, then they will be housed at the Forensic Science Center for storage. The ideal situation would be that the Forensic Science Center itself would analyze the buccal swabs, generate the profiles, and send it to the custodian. That is what we want to get to, and we want to be there very soon. However, at this present moment, while we are in the process of doing the accreditation, the buccal swabs have to be analyzed. And as a result, we are responsible under the Act for storage of them. And we will be responsible for engaging a company an accredited company that will analyze the profiles in the meantime, generate the profiles, send back the samples to us, and the profile, and then we will forward it to the custodian. That is the flow chart for now, until we are accredited. As PS is pushing very hard to get the accreditation done because the committee is always pressed for time and timelines with respect to delivery of the accreditation. We see the Forensic Science Center see ourselves as very pivotal in getting the accreditation to save the government cost and time and to get our data bank populated. That is all I can say on that issue, but the time for accreditation, once we engage the accrediting body, which is very soon, they will now have what is called a pre-assessment for us. And that pre-assessment can take place within a month. Then that pre-assessment will tell us what gaps we need to fill. Once the gaps are filled, they will give us a timeline to do that. We will indicate to them we are ready for assessment, and they will come and assess us. Once that is done and we have the accreditation certificate, if we put it that way, then we'll be able to do our own profiles. Barring that, there is a process for engaging through RFQs other laboratories to do the testing of the buccal swabs in the meantime, and that process has to be completed.
Member Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, the swabs you have already analyzed, there's nothing preventing that data from being uploaded?
No, that is the data we spoke of at the Forensic Science Center.
That will be uploaded?
Yes.
Possible. Now, I'd like to get an indication of the magnitude of cost savings that the country would obtain if you become accredited and do the analysis yourself, as opposed to what it's costing you to engage an accredited company to do that work for you while you were going through accreditation?
We haven't engaged a company as yet. The only parallel I can draw with that is the cost that the police have to pay for each sample that they send abroad for testing. And
is that significantly more than it would cost you to do it internally?
Yeah, I am sure there will be a substantial reduction in cost. We looked at the feasibility of it, cost-benefit ratio, and it is a substantially smaller sum to do the analysis. Mass production, this is something that the lab is competent in. We are doing it as a routine every day, and we have the staff already paid and salaried for that function. So this is where we want to be, where we can do it ourselves.
Okay, now, well, the process of accreditation is really a factor of having proper procedures and policies in place. I mean, accreditation is really giving assurance that your work methodology is sound. So there's I mean, it's not likely that there's any changes to equipment or anything tangible. It's really the way you work. That's what accrediting bodies test. Your integrity in work to ensure that one person isn't involved in performing a test and verifying the standards and approving it. So it's your procedures that the accreditation body would be looking at. So, so whilst accreditation certainly is noble and it gives greater confidence than in the assurance of the quality of your work, and I trust that you all would quickly come up to speed and not prolong that accreditation process unduly. I'm sure it can be done quickly, but in the meantime, I don't see that process really hampering you from continuing to analyze samples going forward, so that the samples that you already have, which you say you can transfer, there should be no break in the continuance of your daily work during this accreditation process.
Yes, I see that in fact is our mantra at the Forensic Science Center, coordinated with different arms of the ministry to work together to get this process done. This has something, the accreditation also involves the acceptance of the staff, the qualifications of the staff. And it's something personal to each forensic expert that they be accredited, in addition to the other facets of accreditation. So it's something of pride and joy to us to be accredited in a quick manner, because we testify in court all the time as experts. So that is, you know.
In fact, what we've done is we've looked at a list of some of the things that accredited labs would need to do to ensure that the lab is accredited. We've done a list. In fact, the center and the Varsity Center, they were just to do that to begin putting things in place. For example, the manuals and all of those kind of things. They've begun doing that even ahead of the accrediting body coming in and doing an assessment. So we've actually looked at what it would take and begin taking action to ensure that those things are in place.
I just have one question. It would be remiss of us not to summon Ms. Harry Paul and not make use of her extensive expertise as Director of Human Resources. In terms of the Scientific Officer 1, which is being handled by Service Commission, we understand 13 are filled of the 20 positions, and interviews have been conducted from the 19th to the 22nd of November 2018. Could you give us an update on the filling of those vacancies and other outstanding vacancies in the interest of expediting this process? Because very often we have a chicken and egg situation in the public service, and we know that in other agencies there have been some challenges.
Having spoken to the DPA indicated that the 7 outstanding vacancies will be filled by the end of January, because the committee will sit on the 29th of January, and a note will be submitted to them.
January 2019?
Yes. So hopefully by the end of February, we will have our 7 Scientific Officer 1 on board, because we have been having continuous talks with the DPO on that matter.
Are there any other outstanding significant positions that need to be filled?
No, not really, because the other positions are the hospitality drivers, and we have big arrangements with those positions to be filled.
Questions from members? With that said, we'd like to thank you all profusely for coming. I have to say that, Mr. Sanka, you've renewed my hope somewhat.
Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton, not so much, but not through any fault of your own. Things are beyond your remit in some instances. I have some concerns, but thank you so much for coming in. In closing, Mr. Lewis, SPS, would you like to make any closing statement?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. I just want to say thanks again for the opportunity to come before you. It helps to keep us on our toes. It helps us to ensure that the programs and projects that you are investigating, that you are looking into, stay on track, stay on the front burner. As I said, there are some instances where matters are outside of the control of the ministry in terms of advancing some of these matters, but we continue to strive and to work with all of our partners to ensure that we could get these programs, in particular these two projects, off the ground and implemented in the shortest possible time, because we are aware of the critical nature of having these two projects completed and operational.
Yeah, Member Oliver's, I don't want to say concern to misrepresent in any way, but that and hope that the Ministry of National Security was as involved in assessing the final choice of iGovTT, because iGovTT may be a procuring agency, but certainly does not have the competence, experience, and personnel in national security matters that the Ministry of National Security will obviously have. So I don't think you could expunge yourselves in terms of the final assessment of the choice, even by iGovTT, even though it may have been totally properly above board. Because I think the final assessment must lie in the hands of the Ministry of National Security because of the implications and the environment in which we operate.
Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. If you just allow me to say that we've taken note of the concerns raised by several members of the committee, and it's certainly something that we are going to go back to take a second look at. Thanks.
And it's not just for clarity, it's not about demonizing any particular organization. It's about the concerns about a perceived monopoly in national security in a very small jurisdiction. So just to clear. So thank you all again for coming before us. We appreciate it. We suspend for a moment of this committee.